You have got to be joking, Lieutenant Commander Alex Reed said, staring at the holographic display with a mixture of disbelief and amusement.
They want us to what? Fleet Admiral Kayla Washington pinched the bridge of her nose.
You heard me correctly, Reed. The Zaxari Dominion has requested an immediate cessation of hostilities and wants to open diplomatic channels.
After they bombarded Chicago? After Brisbane? After everything?
Alex's voice rose with each question. Just like that? Just like that, Washington confirmed, her weathered face betraying no emotion except perhaps the faintest hint of satisfaction. Apparently our little demonstration at Proxima Centauri made quite the impression. Alex ran a hand through his short-cropped hair and let out a whistle. Well, I'll be damned. Who would have thought that humans would be the ones to make the mighty Zaxari piss themselves? Language, Commander, Washington admonished, though there was no real heat behind it. The corner of her mouth twitched upward. But yes, essentially. Across the vast expanse of space, on the bridge of the Zaxari flagship Indomitable Will, Supreme War Leader Zonvax was having what his species' medical professionals might diagnose as a nervous breakdown. Tell me again, he demanded, his four eyes blinking asynchronously in distress. What exactly did the humans do? Science Director Zalnara's appendages trembled as she brought up the footage on the main display. As you can see, Supreme Leader, when our forces engaged their defensive line at Proxima Centauri, they spit it out, Director. They weaponized a star, sir, she said finally. They turned an entire K-class star into a directed energy weapon that destroyed half our assault fleet in less than 6 minutes. Zonvax stared at the footage again. The video showed a standard battle formation of Zaxari warships approaching the human colony world. Then, without warning, the system's star seemed to hiccup. There was no other word for it. A massive solar flare, thousands of times larger than any natural phenomenon, erupted directly toward the Zaxari fleet. The energy surge was precisely calibrated, precisely aimed. Impossible, he whispered. Stars don't just bend to someone's will. Apparently for humans they do, Zalnara said. And that's not the worst of it, sir. How could it possibly get worse? The human commander sent a message after the attack. It appears to be their equivalent of casual conversation, but our translators believe it contains a threat. She tapped a command, and an audio file began to play. Hey there, Zaxari friends! Admiral Daniels here. Hope you enjoyed the light show. Just a little something we whipped up over the weekend. Listen, we've got about 24 more of these stellar manipulators ready to go. And honestly, we're kinda curious what happens if we dial them up to 11. So, maybe we should talk before things get really interesting.
Call me!
Zonvax felt his primary heart skip a beat. Whipped up over the weekend? He repeated, his voice hollow. They're implying they developed this technology. Casually? That appears to be the case, Supreme Leader. And they have more of them. According to their message, yes. And they want to dial them up to 11? What does that even mean? Zalnara consulted her datapad. Our cultural specialists believe it's a reference to an ancient human entertainment form. It means to exceed the maximum intended capacity of something, to go beyond established limits. Zonvax slowly lowered himself into his command chair. They can already weaponize stars, and they want to go beyond that. It wasn't a question. There's more, sir, Zalnara said, her voice barely audible. Our intelligence division has been analyzing human communications that we've intercepted. They don't seem to be taking this war seriously. What do you mean, not seriously? We've destroyed 2 of their major cities. Yes, sir. And while their military and government treat the situation with appropriate gravity, the civilian population seems to be making jokes about it. Jokes? About interstellar warfare? Yes, sir. They have these information networks where they share what they call memes, cultural information packets designed for humor and rapid transmission. After we destroyed Chicago, these memes increased by 8,000%. Most of them mock our military capabilities or suggest creative ways to defeat us. Show me, Zonvax demanded. Zalnara hesitated. Sir, I'm not sure that's... Show me, Director. That's an order. With visible reluctance, Zalnara brought up a series of images on the display. Zonvax stared in disbelief at what appeared to be deliberately simplistic drawings of Zaxari soldiers being defeated in increasingly absurd ways by humans using everyday objects. One depicted a Zaxari battlecruiser being towed away by something called a Honda Civic. Another showed humans using reflective cooking implements to redirect Zaxari energy weapons back at their ships. But most disturbing were the comments attached to these images. LOL. What if we just, built a Dyson sphere around their homeworld? Just saying. Zaxari destroys Chicago. Humans. Invents practical FTL drive out of spite so they can go slap a Zaxari in person. My brother in high school just made a mini black hole for his science fair project. Maybe we could yeet it at the Zaxari LMAO. Xon. Vax stared at the screen, his exoskeleton growing cold. They're not afraid, he said slowly. We've killed millions of their kind, and they're not afraid. They're annoyed. That appears to be the case, sir, Zalnara confirmed. Our psychological warfare experts are quite disturbed by it. It suggests either a species-wide disregard for their own mortality or what? Or they possess such technological superiority that they genuinely don't consider us a serious threat. The Supreme War Leader gazed out at the stars visible through the view screen. Somewhere out there, humans were apparently casually manipulating stellar phenomena while making jokes about his species. Send the message, he said finally. Tell them we wish to discuss terms. 3 days later, Alex found himself in the surreal position of guarding the door to humanity's first official peace talks with the Zaxari Dominion. The location was a hastily converted conference room aboard the International Space Station Freedom, retrofitted with atmosphere scrubbers capable of handling the methane-heavy mix that the Zaxari breathed. This is so weird, muttered Corporal Dmitry Volkov beside him. 6 months ago these guys were raining death from orbit, and now they're sitting in there discussing trade routes? Alex shrugged. That's politics for you. 1 minute you're sworn enemies, the next you're figuring out how to make money off each other. Still, Dmitry said, I lost my cousin in Brisbane. Doesn't seem right. I hear you, Alex replied, his voice softening. But between you and me, if the brass decided to play nice, it's probably because they've got something bigger planned. The Admiral doesn't strike me as the forgiving type. Their conversation was interrupted as the door slid open, revealing Admiral Washington and her diplomatic team. The humans looked tired but satisfied. Behind them, the Zaxari delegation moved with the stiff formality of the deeply uncomfortable. Commander Reed, Washington said, please escort our guests back to their shuttle. Yes, ma'am, Alex replied, snapping to attention. As he fell into step beside the Zaxari delegation, Alex couldn't help but study them. He'd seen plenty in combat footage, of course, but never this close and never alive. They were taller than humans by about a foot, with chitinous exoskeletons in varying shades of blue and green. Their 4 arms moved with unsettling precision, and their 4 eyes, arranged in a diamond pattern on their faceplates, darted around constantly, as if expecting an attack. The lead delegate, who had been introduced as Sub-Emissary Trazkor, suddenly turned one of his eye stalks toward Alex. Your admiral is a formidable negotiator, he said, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into stilted English. Alex maintained his professional demeanor. She didn't get those stars on her shoulder by being a pushover. Indeed, Trazkor said. Then, after a pause, May I ask you a question, Commander Reed? You can ask. Doesn't mean I'll answer. Fair enough. Trazkor's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, which Alex had been briefed was a sign of contemplation. The stellar manipulator. The weapon your people used at Proxima Centauri. How long has humanity possessed such technology? Alex kept his face carefully neutral. The truth, which he knew from his security clearance, was that the stellar manipulator had been a desperate last-minute gambit cobbled together by a team of physicists who weren't entirely sure it would work, and were even less sure they could control it. It had been a miracle it hadn't destroyed the colony it was meant to protect. But the Zaxari didn't need to know that. That's classified information, Sub-Emissary, he said, then allowed himself a small smile. But I can tell you that what you saw was just the prototype. The production models are much more impressive. He took perhaps a bit too much satisfaction from the way all 4 of Trazkor's eyes widened simultaneously. The human escort, Commander Reed, Trazkor reminded himself, was obviously lying. Or at least not telling the complete truth. The Zaxari had been studying humans intensively since first contact, and while their physiological stress responses were alien, certain patterns were universal among sentient species. The slight elevation in vocal pitch, the minimal pause before responding, the overly precise word choice, all indicated deception. But why would a mere security officer lie about military capabilities that had already been demonstrated? Unless the weapon wasn't as reliable as they wanted the Zaxari to believe. This thought occupied Trazkor all the way back to the shuttle, and throughout the journey to the Zaxari diplomatic vessel waiting at the edge of the system. It was still turning in his mind when he was summoned to a secure communication with Supreme War Leader Zon Vax. Report, Sub-Emissary, the Supreme Leader demanded as soon as the quantum encrypted channel was established. What are the terms? Trazcor felt his secondary heart flutter anxiously. The humans drive a hard bargain, Supreme Leader. They demand reparations for Chicago and Brisbane, to be paid in rare earth elements and helium-3. They require us to recognize their sovereignty over all currently established colonies, plus a buffer zone extending 5 light-years beyond each settlement. And in return, they will not deploy their stellar manipulation technology against Zaxari worlds. They will establish formal diplomatic relations and consider limited technology exchange in non-military sectors. Sonvax was silent for a long moment. These terms are harsh. Yes, Supreme Leader, but we have no choice but to accept them, Sonvax finished. Not while they hold the power to turn our own stars against us. Trazcor hesitated. About that, Supreme Leader. I have reason to believe the human stellar technology may not be as advanced as they claim. He outlined his observations of Commander Reed, and his theory that the Proxima Centauri incident might have been either a fluke or a prototype with significant limitations. It would explain why they haven't used it more widely, despite our attacks on their homeworld. Sonvax considered this. An interesting theory, Sub-Emissary, and if true, it suggests we might have capitulated too quickly. Precisely, Supreme Leader. What would you suggest? Trazcor chose his words carefully. I believe we should accept their terms for now, while accelerating our own research into stellar phenomena. If we can understand how their technology works, we might develop countermeasures. And if their capability is indeed limited, we will be in a position to renegotiate from a place of strength in the future. A prudent approach, Sonvax agreed. See to it personally, Sub-Emissary. I am appointing you as liaison to the human diplomatic mission. Learn everything you can about their technology, their military capabilities, and especially their stellar manipulators. It will be done, Supreme Leader. After the communication ended, Trazcor stood motionless, contemplating his new assignment. Dealing with humans on a regular basis would be challenging. Their bizarre social customs, their unpredictable emotional responses, their disturbing habit of baring their teeth in what they claimed was a friendly gesture, all of it set his nerves on edge. But for the glory of the Dominion, he would endure. They're up to something, Alex stated flatly, staring at the intelligence report on his tablet. Admiral Washington raised an eyebrow. That's a rather broad assessment, Commander. Care to elaborate? They were in the Admiral's office at Luna Command, Earth's gleaming new military headquarters built into the side of a crater on the far side of the moon. It had been 6 months since the peace treaty, and things had been suspiciously quiet. Look at these resource allocations, Alex said, swiping through the data. They're pouring an insane amount of resources into astronomical research facilities. Their scientific vessel deployments have increased 300% in the past quarter, all focused on studying stars similar to Proxima Centauri. They're trying to figure out how we did it, Washington said with a nod. Expected and accounted for. With all due respect, Admiral, I think it's more than that. Our deep cover assets report they're also accelerating production of these. He pulled up a schematic, which our analysts believe are some kind of stellar shielding devices. They're preparing for us to use the manipulator again. Washington leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled. And this concerns you because... Alex stared at her. Because they're preparing countermeasures against a weapon system that we both know was a one-off Hail Mary that we have no idea how to replicate. If they figure out we were bluffing... Commander Reed, Washington cut him off. Do you really think I would stake humanity's security on a bluff that could be called? He blinked. Ma'am? Washington tapped a sequence on her desk console, and the office's security level increased. The windows polarized, and a subtle hum indicated that additional anti-surveillance measures had activated. What I'm about to tell you is classified cosmic top secret, she said, her voice deadly serious. 6 weeks after the Proxima incident, a team at the Tycho Accelerator facility successfully recreated the stellar excitation effect under controlled conditions. 3 months after that, the first operational stellar manipulator was deployed in the Alpha Centauri system. Alex felt his jaw go slack. You're saying it's real? We can actually do it reliably? Not only can we do it, Commander, but we've improved on the original design. The current generation of manipulators require less energy and provide more precise control over the stellar reaction. But Alex struggled to process this. If we have this capability, a functional superweapon, why agree to peace terms at all? Why not just demand unconditional surrender? Washington's expression grew solemn. Because wielding that kind of power comes with extraordinary responsibility. Yes, we could obliterate the Zaxari homeworld. We could force them into submission. But what kind of species would that make us? She stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the stark lunar landscape. Humanity has been down that road before, Commander. We've seen what happens when technological superiority leads to imperial ambition. It never ends well, not even for the victors. Alex absorbed this in silence. Finally, he asked, "So what's our actual strategy here?" "Deterrence," Washington replied simply. "The Zaxari need to believe we can destroy them if provoked, but that we choose not to out of principle rather than inability. That's the foundation of any lasting peace. And if they do develop countermeasures?" Washington turned back to him with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Then we'll need to show them that human ingenuity isn't limited to manipulating stars. Which brings me to why I called you here today." She returned to her desk and pulled up a personnel file. His personnel file, Alex realized with surprise. "I'm assigning you as military attaché to our new embassy on Zaxar Prime," she said. "Your cover will be as a diplomatic security officer, but your actual mission will be to monitor their technological developments and assess their true intentions toward humanity." Alex stared at her. "But you want me to be a spy? Admiral, I'm a combat officer, not an intelligence operative." "Which is precisely why you're perfect for this role," Washington countered. "The Zaxari will be watching for trained intelligence agents. A straightforward military man like yourself won't trigger their suspicions. With all due respect, ma'am, I think you're overestimating my ability to be subtle." Washington actually chuckled at that. "Oh, I don't want you to be subtle, Commander. In fact, I'm counting on your direct approach. The Zaxari respect strength and clarity. Your job isn't to sneak around stealing secrets. We have other assets for that. Your job is to be visibly human, to remind them every day what they're dealing with." Alex considered this. "Psychological warfare, then?" "If you want to call it that," Washington agreed. "I prefer to think of it as active diplomacy." The orbital approach to Zaxar Prime was, Alex had to admit, impressive. The planet itself was slightly larger than Earth, with sprawling azure oceans and landmasses in varying shades of russet and gold. But it was the orbital infrastructure that truly caught the eye. An intricate web of space stations, shipyards, and defensive platforms that put Earth's burgeoning space presence to shame. "First time seeing it?" asked a voice beside him. Alex turned to find Dr. Elizabeth Reyes, the embassy's science officer, gazing out the same viewport. She was a small woman with keen eyes and a perpetual expression of curiosity. "That obvious, huh?" she smiled. "You've got that calculating military threats look that all you security types get. Trying to figure out how many torpedoes it would take to punch through their defenses?" "Just professional interest," Alex replied with a shrug. "Impressive setup, though." "The Zaxari have been a spacefaring civilization about a century longer than we have," Elizabeth said. "Most of this," she gestured at the orbital complex, "predates our first contact with them." "Makes you wonder why they bothered attacking us at all," Alex mused. "They clearly had the technological edge." Elizabeth gave him a sidelong glance. "Did they, though? We're the ones who figured out how to weaponize a star." Before Alex could respond, the ship's intercom announced they were beginning final docking procedures with the diplomatic orbital platform. As the only military officer among the 12 embassy staff, Alex had responsibilities to attend to. "Gotta go make sure none of our diplomats accidentally offends our hosts by breathing wrong," he said. "See you planetside, Doctor." The actual arrival process was tediously formal. The Zaxari, Alex was learning, placed enormous importance on ceremonial protocols. Every member of the embassy staff was introduced individually, each introduction followed by a specific ritual phrase from both parties. By the time they reached the end of the receiving line, Alex's face hurt from maintaining a diplomatic smile. The last Zaxari to greet them was sub-emissary Trazkor, whom Alex recognized from the peace negotiations. The alien diplomat's 4 eyes focused on him with unmistakable recognition. "Commander Reed," he said through his translator. "What an unexpected pleasure. I was not aware you had been assigned to the embassy staff." "Recently promoted to diplomatic security," Alex replied smoothly. "Guess my superiors thought I had the right touch for interspecies relations." Trazakor made a sound that the translator didn't catch, something between a click and a hiss. "Indeed, your direct approach will certainly bring a unique perspective to our ongoing dialogue." As they were escorted to their quarters, Ambassador Kwan leaned over to Alex. "You know the sub-emissary?" she asked quietly. "We met briefly during the peace talks," Alex explained. "I was on security detail." Kwan studied him thoughtfully. "Well, having a familiar face might be helpful. The Zaxari are extremely hierarchical and slow to trust outsiders. Any existing relationship, even a tenuous one, could be valuable." "I wouldn't exactly call it a relationship, Ambassador. More like mutual suspicion." Kwan smiled. "In diplomacy, Commander Reed, That's often where the most productive dialogues begin. The human diplomatic contingent was, Trazakor had to admit, not what he had expected. He had anticipated a group of stern, military-minded individuals, perhaps flaunting their technological superiority with subtle threats and demonstrations of power. Instead, they seemed almost ordinary. The ambassador was a polite, soft-spoken woman who expressed genuine interest in Zaxari culture. The various attaches and specialists were focused on their respective areas of expertise, from agriculture to communication technology. Even Commander Reed, despite his military bearing, conducted himself with surprising restraint. It was unsettling. They're hiding something, he told Science Director Zalnara during their weekly briefing. This cooperative facade doesn't match what we know of human behavior during the conflict. Zalnara's appendages moved in a gesture of cautious agreement. Perhaps, but our research suggests humans are remarkably adaptable. Their social structures can transform rapidly in response to changed circumstances. Or perhaps this is simply another form of warfare, Trazkor countered. A more subtle approach while they assess our vulnerabilities. That is also possible, Zalnara acknowledged. What have you learned about their stellar manipulation technology? Trazakor's mouth parts clicked in frustration. Very little. Their science officer, Dr. Reyes, deflects my questions with remarkable skill. She speaks at length about stellar phenomena, energy transmission theories, and plasma dynamics, but never directly addresses the manipulator itself. And Commander Reed? He is... Trazkor searched for the right word. Provocative. When asked about human military capabilities, he responds with what I believe are intentionally alarming statements delivered in a casual manner. Example? Yesterday, during the cultural exchange reception, I inquired about human defensive strategies. He said, and I quote, "Oh, you know, the usual stuff. Kinetic barriers, point defense systems, weaponized black holes, the basics." Zalnara's 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession. Weaponized black holes? That's impossible. Even with their stellar technology, creating and controlling singularities would require... I know, Trazkor interrupted. When I expressed skepticism, he simply shrugged and said, "Well, they were impossible until some grad student figured it out last Tuesday. You know how it is with humans. Tell us something can't be done, and some idiot will do it just to prove you wrong." He was obviously lying, Zalnara said, but her voice held a note of uncertainty. Was he? 3 cycles ago, we would have said stellar manipulation was impossible, yet here we are. Zalnara's appendages twitched nervously. The research team has made progress understanding the principles behind the Proxima Centauri incident. We believe it involves creating a precisely calibrated resonance effect in the star's magnetosphere, essentially turning a portion of the stellar mass into a directed plasma weapon. And countermeasures? Theoretical at this stage. We're developing shield technology that might deflect or absorb the initial energy surge, but against a full stellar event. She left the sentence unfinished. Trazkor stared out the viewport at the gleaming human embassy ship in orbit. Such a small vessel, representing a species that had somehow managed to turn stars themselves into weapons. "Continue your research, Director," he said finally, "and I will continue mine." 6 months into his posting, Alex had settled into a routine. Mornings were spent reviewing security protocols and intelligence reports. Afternoons typically involved escorting embassy personnel to various meetings or cultural exchanges. Evenings were his own, which he usually spent exploring the diplomatic quarter of Zaxar Prime's capital city, or, more frequently, engaging in what he'd come to think of as conversational sparring with Trazkor. Their latest venue was a rooftop garden that served food and beverages compatible with both human and Zaxari physiologies. Alex nursed a drink that tasted vaguely like smoky whiskey, while Trazkor consumed something that bubbled ominously in a metal container. "So let me get this straight," Alex said, continuing their conversation about Zaxari's social structures. "Your entire society is organized around these functional lineages, and everyone just accepts their assigned role?" "You make it sound more rigid than it is," Trazkor replied, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into increasingly fluid English as its algorithms adapted to his speech patterns. "A young Zaxari undergoes extensive aptitude testing before being assigned to a lineage, and there are processes for reassignment if an individual demonstrates talents in other areas." "Still sounds pretty restrictive to me," Alex said with a shrug. "Humans tend to value individual choice, even if it leads to inefficiency." "Yes, we've noticed," Trazkor said dryly. "Your system produces remarkable innovations alongside baffling wastefulness." "It is contradictory," Alex grinned. "That's humanity in a nutshell, my friend. Contradictory to the core. Perhaps that explains your approach to warfare, Trazcor ventured, his 4 eyes focusing intently on Alex. One moment unleashing star-destroying weapons, the next offering peace terms. And there it was, the real purpose behind these casual meetings. Trazcor never missed an opportunity to probe for information about human military capabilities, particularly the stellar manipulator. Warfare is just another contradiction for us, Alex replied easily. We're simultaneously the most violent and most compassionate species you'll ever meet. We'll move heaven and earth to save a single life, then turn around and develop weapons that can destroy planets. A dangerous combination. You have no idea, Alex said, allowing a hint of steel to enter his voice. You know what's really terrifying about humans, Trazcor? It's not our technology. It's our creativity. The Zaxari diplomat tilted his head. Explain. Take your stellar shield research, for example. Trazcor's eyes widened in alarm. I don't know what you're... Alex waved away the protest. Please, we've had eyes on your research facilities since day one. Anyway, you're working on countermeasures for the stellar manipulator, which is smart. The problem is, by the time you perfect those shields, we'll have moved on to something else entirely. Such as your alleged black hole weapons? Trazcor's translator couldn't quite convey sarcasm, but the intent was clear. Alex laughed. Maybe. Or maybe something even more bizarre. The point is, you're trying to defend against what we've already done, while we're imagining what nobody's ever thought of before. He leaned forward. Do you know what humans were doing while your scientists were studying Proxima Centauri? They were wondering if you could encode information into the quantum fabric of space-time itself, just because someone thought it would be neat. This was, of course, complete bullshit. But Admiral Washington had made it clear that part of his job was to keep the Zaxari off balance, to maintain the psychological edge that had brought them to the negotiating table in the first place. Trazcor was silent for a long moment. Your species is disturbing, Commander Reed. Yeah, we get that a lot, Alex replied cheerfully. More drinks? In his private quarters, Trazcor compiled his latest report for Supreme War Leader Zonvax. After a standard formal introduction, he came directly to the point. Human diplomatic personnel continue to integrate into the approved sections of Zaxari society. Their behavioral patterns remain consistent with previous observations, with no detected security violations or unauthorized access attempts. Of particular note is my ongoing dialogue with Commander Reed, whose statements regarding human technological capabilities become increasingly concerning. While many of his claims are clearly exaggerated, the casual manner in which he discusses theoretical technologies suggests a cultural comfort with concepts our scientists consider nearly impossible. Most recently, he referenced ongoing human research into encoding information into the quantum fabric of space-time. Our physicists believe this may be a garbled reference to quantum entanglement communication, which we ourselves have been researching for decades without significant breakthrough. However, given humanity's demonstrated ability to manipulate stellar matter in ways our science previously deemed impossible, I recommend continued allocation of resources to advanced theoretical physics research, with particular emphasis on dimensional manipulation and quantum field theory. On a related matter, Science Director Zalnara reports the first successful small-scale test of stellar shielding technology. While far from operational capacity, the principles appear sound. Full development timeline remains at approximately 3.6 standard cycles. He paused, considering whether to include his personal observations. After a moment's hesitation, he continued. As a final note, I must express growing concern regarding human psychological warfare tactics. Their apparent strategy involves a careful balance of technological intimidation and diplomatic engagement, creating an unsettling dynamic where we cannot be certain which claims are genuine and which are bluffs. Most troubling is the evident comfort with which humans maintain this ambiguity. Where Zaxari value clarity and precision in communication, humans seem to deliberately cultivate uncertainty. This may be their most dangerous weapon, not their technology, but their willingness to operate in a state of calculated unpredictability. End report. After transmitting the encrypted message, Trazcor settled into his meditation posture, attempting to clear his mind of the day's tensions. But Commander Reed's words kept echoing. You're trying to defend against what we've already done, while we're imagining what nobody's ever thought of before. The worst part was, he couldn't dismiss it as mere psychological manipulation. The evidence supported Reed's claim. Humanity had gone from a pre-spaceflight civilization to wielding stellar energy as a weapon in less than 3 centuries, a pace of development that defied all Zaxari models of technological evolution. What would they be capable of in another century? Another decade? His meditation disrupted. Trazcor rose and moved to his viewing portal, gazing out at the night sky. Somewhere out there, humans were imagining what nobody's ever thought of before. And that, more than any weapon, terrified him. "We have a problem," Dr. Elizabeth Reyes announced without preamble, dropping into the seat across from Alex in the embassy's secure briefing room. Alex looked up from his tactical review. "Good morning to you too, Dr. Coffee." He gestured to the pot on the side table. "No time," she said, pushing a data tablet toward him. "Look at this." Alex scanned the information on the screen, his brow furrowing. "Is this accurate?" "Triple verified through separate intelligence channels," Elizabeth confirmed. "The Zaxari have achieved a breakthrough in their stellar shielding technology. According to our analysis, they'll have a working prototype within 6 months and full deployment capabilities a year after that." Alex leaned back, considering the implications. "So they're about to call our bluff." "It's worse than that," Elizabeth said, lowering her voice despite the room's security measures. "Our actual stellar manipulator program has hit a major setback. The Alpha Centauri test last month failed catastrophically, nearly triggered a Nova event that would have wiped out the entire system." "Jesus," Alex muttered. "Casualties?" "The research team evacuated in time, but we lost the entire facility. Admiral Washington has suspended the program pending a full review." Alex ran a hand through his hair. "So we have no functional stellar weapons, and soon the Zaxari will have shields against the weapons we don't have anyway." "That about sums it up," Elizabeth agreed grimly. "Once they confirm their shields work, what's to stop them from resuming hostilities?" "The treaty is only as strong as the deterrent behind it," she cut him off. "You know that as well as I do." Alex nodded slowly. The entire piece had been built on the Zaxari fear of human stellar manipulation technology. "If that fear evaporated, we need to buy time," he said finally. "Keep them believing in the threat until we can develop something real to back it up." "That's the other reason I'm here," Elizabeth said, her expression shifting from concern to excitement. "I've been working on something, a theoretical weapons platform that might actually be feasible with our current technology level." She pulled up a series of schematics on her tablet. Alex wasn't a physicist, but he could follow the basic principles of what she was showing him. "You want to manipulate gravity?" he asked, studying the diagrams. Elizabeth nodded eagerly. "Not just manipulate it, weaponize it. We've been focused on stellar manipulation because that's what worked at Proxima Centauri, but there are other fundamental forces we can exploit." "And this would work?" "In theory," she admitted. "But the math checks out, and we've already demonstrated small-scale proof of concept in lab conditions. With proper funding and prioritization, we could have a functional prototype within 8 months. Alex frowned. "That's still too long. If the Zaxari perfect their shields in 6 months and realize we've got nothing to back up our threats, which is why we need to convince them we're working on something even more terrifying than stellar manipulation," Elizabeth finished for him. "Something their shields won't protect against." Alex stared at her. "You want to bluff about a new superweapon to buy time to develop an actual new superweapon to replace the original superweapon that we were already bluffing about?" Elizabeth grinned. "When you put it that way, it sounds slightly insane." "Slightly?" Alex shook his head, but he was smiling too. "Although, it's so absurd it might actually work. The Zaxari already think we're technological wizards with a casual approach to physics-breaking weapons." "Exactly. And we need to maintain that impression," Elizabeth said. "I've been feeding Trazcor carefully calculated leaks about our research for months. He's convinced we're decades ahead of them in quantum physics. So what's our new terrifying weapon supposed to be?" Elizabeth's eyes gleamed with excitement. "How do you feel about dimensional phasing?" The human concept of a poker night was, Trazcor had decided, a surprisingly effective tool for cultural and intelligence gathering. The card game itself was simple enough. A combination of probability calculation and psychological deception that had certain parallels to Zaxari strategy games. But the real value lay in the social dynamics that emerged during play. Humans, he had observed, became remarkably forthcoming when engaged in competitive recreation, especially when mild intoxicants were involved. "I'll raise you 20, Commander Reed said, pushing a stack of plastic chips into the center of the table. Trazcor studied his cards, then the human's face. Reed showed what humans called a poker face, deliberately neutral to conceal the strength of his hand. But Trazcor had been studying human micro-expressions for months now, and had identified several subtle tells in the commander's behavior. "Call," he said, matching the bet. "And what were you saying about the gravitational anomaly near Jupiter's L5 point?"
Dr. Reyes, the human science officer, exchanged a quick glance with Reed, so quick that a less observant Zaxari might have missed it.
Nothing important, she said casually.
Just some unusual readings from our deep space monitoring network. I heard, said another player, a junior diplomat named Flores, that it might be related to that classified research project at the Europa facility, the one that's got the whole science division working overtime.
Reed shot Flores a warning look, which the younger man either missed or chose to ignore.
Ah, you mean Project Looking Glass? Dr. Reyes said, her tone deliberately light.
I can't really discuss the details, but let's just say we're exploring some interesting properties of space-time. Trazcor kept his 4 eyes carefully neutral, but his interest was immediately piqued. Looking glass, he repeated.
An interesting designation. Just an old Earth reference, Reed said dismissively.
Cards on the table, people. The commander revealed a strong hand, what humans called a full house, and reached for the pot.
But Trazcor laid down his own cards, displaying a superior combination. I believe this game goes to me, he said, unable to keep a note of satisfaction from his translator's voice. As he gathered the chips, he watched Reed and Reyes exchange another meaningful glance. They were baiting him, he was certain. The question was, with truth or with deception. Either way, he would include this Project Looking Glass in his next report. If humans were indeed exploring interesting properties of space-time, the Supreme War Leader would want to know immediately. Hook, line, and sinker, Alex said once they were alone in the embassy's secure communications room.
He couldn't have been more obvious if he'd started taking notes at the table. Elizabeth laughed. Flores played his part perfectly.
Just the right amount of indiscretion to make it believable.
Speaking of indiscretion, Alex said, raising an eyebrow. Project Looking Glass? I thought we agreed on Event Horizon as our fake superweapon designation. I improvised, she admitted.
Looking Glass sounds more mysterious, don't you think? Like we're seeing into another dimension. Which is exactly what we want them to think we're doing. Alex nodded approvingly. Nice touch. Did you plant the Jupiter anomaly data in their monitoring systems?
Yesterday.
Their sensors should be detecting it already. Just enough gravitational distortion to be noticeable, not enough to be obviously artificial. And I've backdated some classified communications about unusual readings in the area going back 3 months. Alex shook his head in admiration. You know, in another life you would have made a hell of an intelligence operative. I'll take that as a compliment, Elizabeth replied with a smile. Though I still prefer equations to espionage. Speaking of which, Alex said, his tone growing serious, how's the actual research coming along? The gravity weapon?
Elizabeth's smile faded. Slower than I'd like. The theory is sound, but the power requirements are problematic. We're looking at energy consumption equivalent to the entire output of Earth's fusion grid for several minutes. Can we scale it down? Not without compromising effectiveness.
The whole point is to create a localized gravity well strong enough to disable or destroy Zaxari warships.
If we reduce the power, all we'll do is give them a bumpy ride.
Alex considered this. What about delivery system? Any progress there? Some, Elizabeth nodded.
We've designed a drone platform that could theoretically generate and contain the field long enough to reach a target. The problem is, it's a one-way trip. The gravitational forces would tear apart any vessel generating them once the containment field reaches critical mass.
So it's a kamikaze weapon, Alex said grimly.
Essentially, yes. A very expensive, very power-hungry kamikaze weapon.
Alex stared at the schematics on the screen.
Keep working on it. And in the meantime, let's make sure our Zaxari friends are thoroughly distracted by our dimensional research. Supreme War Leader Zonvax studied the latest intelligence report with growing concern.
Around him, the War Council chamber was silent, all eyes fixed on their leader.
Project Looking Glass, he said finally.
What do we know about it?
Science Director Zalnara stepped forward. Very little with certainty, Supreme Leader. We have detected unusual gravitational disturbances in the human solar system, centered around their 5th planet's Lagrange points. The patterns are unlike any natural phenomenon we've observed. And Sub-Emissary Trazcor's intelligence?
Suggests the humans are researching dimensional manipulation,
Zalnara said, her appendages moving in a gesture of scientific caution, though the precise nature and purpose remain unclear.
Unclear?
Zonvax's voice rose.
Are they creating weapons or not? Fleet Commander Krelvor spoke up, his battle-scarred exoskeleton gleaming under the chamber's lights.
We must assume hostile intent, Supreme Leader. The humans have consistently prioritized weapons development over all other scientific pursuits.
And could such technology bypass our stellar shields? Zonvax asked, turning back to Zalnara.
The science director hesitated. If, and I stress if,
they have indeed developed a means of manipulating dimensional boundaries, then yes, conventional shielding would likely be ineffective. Explain, Zonvax demanded. Our stellar shields are designed to deflect and absorb energy, primarily electromagnetic and plasma-based weapons. But dimensional phasing would operate on fundamentally different principles. In theory, it could allow the humans to bypass physical barriers entirely, perhaps by shifting matter partially into another dimensional plane. Zonvax's 4 eyes blinked rapidly in distress. Are you suggesting they could phase through our defenses? Simply appear inside our ships, our facilities, our worlds? It's theoretically possible, Zalnara admitted, though the energy requirements would be astronomical. Energy requirements didn't stop them from weaponizing a star, Fleet Commander Krelvor pointed out darkly. Supreme Leader, we cannot allow the humans to complete this research. We must take preemptive action. Zonvax turned his gaze to the strategic display, where the human solar system rotated slowly. The peace treaty was signed under duress, Krelvor interrupted, when we believed they possessed an overwhelming technological advantage. If they are still developing new superweapons despite our compliance with the treaty terms, then they have already violated its spirit, if not its letter. The Supreme War Leader was silent for a long moment, weighing options and consequences. Finally, he turned to his War Council. Prepare a stealth strike force, he ordered. Target the human research facility in the Jupiter system. I want it destroyed before this Project Looking Glass can be completed. As the council members hurried to comply, Zonvax added, and recall sub-emissary Trazcor from Earth immediately. If we are to resume hostilities, I want our diplomats safely home first. Alex was in the middle of his morning workout when the embassy alarms began blaring. He sprinted to the command center, still in his exercise clothes, to find Ambassador Kwan already there, her face grim. What's happening? He demanded. We just received word from Luna Command, she replied. A Zaxari battle group has been detected on approach to the Jupiter system. They've dropped out of FTL at the edge of the heliopause, but they're on a direct course for the L5 research station. Alex felt his blood run cold. They took the bait. Too well, Kwan said sharply. They're sending a strike force against a facility that contains nothing but fabricated sensor data and a handful of maintenance personnel. How long until they reach the station? At their current velocity, approximately 6 hours. Alex's mind raced. We need to evacuate the station personnel immediately. And then... He hesitated. And then what, Commander? Kwan prompted. And then we need to decide how to respond to this treaty violation. He finished carefully. Has Admiral Washington been informed? She's convening an emergency session of the Defense Council as we speak, Kwan confirmed. But there's more. The Zaxari embassy has just announced the immediate recall of all diplomatic personnel, including sub-emissary Trazcor. They're preparing to depart within the hour, so they're pulling their people out before launching an attack, Alex muttered. At least they're being somewhat civilized about it. What do you think will happen next? Kwan asked, and Alex was struck by the genuine concern in her voice. The ambassador was a career diplomat, not a military strategist, and the sudden shift from peace talks to imminent hostilities had clearly shaken her. Best case scenario? We catch them in the act, call them out for violating the treaty, and leverage it for concessions in a new round of negotiations, he said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. And the worst case? Alex met her gaze steadily. War. Round 2. Only this time, they think they've neutralized our biggest advantage before we could develop an even more powerful weapon. But Project Looking Glass isn't real, Kwan said, lowering her voice. And from what I understand, our actual stellar manipulation capabilities are limited at best. Exactly. Alex nodded grimly. Which means if this escalates to full-scale conflict, we'll be facing an enemy who believes they've neutralized a threat that never existed, while our actual defenses are nowhere near as formidable as they think. A communications officer interrupted them. Commander Reed, Ambassador Kwan, we're receiving a priority transmission from Admiral Washington. Secure channel. They moved to the encrypted communications suite, where Washington's face appeared on the screen, her expression severe. Ambassador, Commander, she greeted them tersely. I assume you've been briefed on the Zaxari battle group? Yes, Admiral, Kwan replied. We're also aware that the Zaxari diplomatic corps is withdrawing from Earth. The same is happening here, Washington confirmed. They're making a clean break before launching their attack. She focused on Alex. Commander Reed, your operation appears to have been too successful. The Zaxari aren't just investigating Project Looking Glass. They're moving to destroy it before it can be completed. With all due respect, Admiral, what did we expect? Alex asked. We deliberately led them to believe we were developing another superweapon. Of course, they'd try to take it out preemptively. The intention was to buy time for our actual weapons research, Washington reminded him, not to provoke a renewed conflict. So what's the plan, ma'am? Washington's expression was grim. We've evacuated all personnel from the Jupiter L5 station. We're going to let the Zaxari destroy it. Let them? Alex repeated incredulously. It's an old station scheduled for decommissioning anyway, Washington explained. And we've loaded it with enough sensor equipment to make it look like a major research facility. When they hit it, we'll have irrefutable proof of their treaty violation. And then what? And then, Washington said with a cold smile, we activate the real Project Looking Glass. Alex and Ambassador Kwan exchanged confused glances. The real? Alex began. Did you really think I'd let you run a psychological operation of this magnitude without a backup plan, Commander? Washington asked. While you've been planting false information about dimensional research, we've been conducting the actual research elsewhere. You're saying we really do have dimensional technology? Kwan asked, clearly shocked. Not exactly, Washington replied. But we do have something that will make the Zaxari believe we do. Something that will reinforce everything they fear about human technological capabilities. She tapped a command on her console, and a new set of schematics appeared on their screen. Operation Smoke and Mirrors, she said. Prepare for immediate evacuation from Zaxar Prime. You have approximately 4 hours before things get interesting. Trazcor supervised the final preparations for departure with mixed emotions. The recall order had been unexpected, though not entirely surprising given the intelligence he had been providing about human weapons research. Still, to abandon the diplomatic mission so abruptly felt like failure. A soft chime indicated someone at his quarters entrance. Enter, he commanded. The door slid open to reveal Commander Reed, still dressed casually in what appeared to be exercise attire. The human made no attempt to hide his knowledge of the situation. So, Reed said without preamble, I hear you're leaving us. Recall orders, Trazcor confirmed, seeing no point in pretense. Diplomatic necessities. Diplomatic necessities, Reed repeated with a skeptical smile. Right. Nothing to do with the battle group you're sending to Jupiter, then? Trazcor felt his secondary heart skip a beat, but maintained his composure. I don't know what you're talking about, Commander. Sure you don't. Reed stepped further into the room, his posture relaxed, but his eyes alert. Let me ask you something, sub-emissary. Did you actually believe everything I told you about human technological capabilities? All those casual comments about black hole weapons and dimensional phasing? Are you now claiming they were falsehoods? Trazcor countered. Reed shrugged. Some yes, some no. That's the beauty of it. You never know which is which. Is this conversation leading somewhere, Commander? Trazcor asked, his patience wearing thin. Just a friendly warning, Reed said, his tone suddenly serious. Whatever your fleet is planning at Jupiter, don't do it. And if this hypothetical operation were to proceed, Reed's expression hardened, then you'll find out which of our weapons are real and which aren't. And trust me, you don't want that. For a moment, Trazcor was tempted to contact Supreme War Leader Zonvax, to warn him that the humans might know about the planned strike. But what would he say? That a human military officer had made vague threats disguised as friendly advice? No, the attack plan was already in motion. The time for diplomacy had passed. I'll take your concern under advisement, Commander, he said formally. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have preparations to complete. Reed nodded slowly. Safe travels, sub-emissary. I have a feeling we'll be seeing each other again soon, one way or another. After the human departed, Trazcor stood motionless for several moments, his mind racing. There had been something in Reed's manner, not fear, certainly, but a kind of grim certainty that was unsettling. What did the humans know? And more importantly, what were they prepared to do in response? All embassy personnel accounted for, Ambassador, Alex reported, as their shuttle accelerated away from Zaxar Prime. We've cleared the orbital security perimeter and are on course for the rendezvous with the Vancouver. Ambassador Kwan nodded, her attention focused on the secure communications channel where Admiral Washington was providing final instructions. The Zaxari battle group will reach Jupiter L5 in approximately 20 minutes, Washington was saying. Once they destroy the station, we'll initiate Operation Smoke and Mirrors. And what exactly does that entail, Admiral? Kwan asked. Washington's expression was grimly satisfied. A demonstration of capabilities that the Zaxari believe are theoretical, but which we've actually developed in secret. Not dimensional phasing, surely? Alex interjected. No, Commander, not quite that exotic, Washington admitted. but something almost as impressive, and far more practically applicable to warfare. The shuttle's pilot interrupted. Commander Reed, we've been contacted by a Zaxari patrol vessel. They're demanding to know why we've deviated from our filed flight plan. Alex exchanged glances with Quan. Tell them we're conducting routine diplomatic transport operations, and we'll return to our designated corridor shortly. Do you think they'll buy it? Quan asked quietly. Doesn't matter, Alex replied. We just need another 15 minutes to reach the Vancouver's position behind Zaxar Prime's third moon. Once we're aboard, they can take us to FTL before the Zaxari realize what's happening. On the communication screen, Washington continued her briefing. Once the Zaxari attack the Jupiter station, we'll activate the quantum entanglement network we've secretly installed throughout their home system. Quantum entanglement? Alex repeated. For what purpose? Communication is only one application of entangled particles, Commander, Washington explained. When properly configured across a large enough network, they can be used to generate precisely targeted spatial distortions. Alex's eyes widened as understanding dawned. You're going to make it look like we're opening dimensional portals. Precisely, Washington confirmed with a satisfied nod. The distortions themselves are harmless, basically sophisticated holograms with some minor gravitational effects. But to Zaxari sensors, they'll appear to be tears in the fabric of space-time. And when these tears appear throughout their home system immediately after they attack our research station, Quan said slowly, they'll believe we've activated our dimensional weapons in retaliation, Washington finished, creating the impression that we could open a portal anywhere in their territory at any time. Alex whistled softly. That's brilliant and terrifying. Sometimes the most effective weapon is the one you never have to fire, Washington said. If the Zaxari believe we can bypass their defenses at will, they'll have no choice but to return to the negotiating table. The shuttle shuddered suddenly, and warning lights flashed across the control panel. We're being targeted by Zaxari defense platforms, the pilot shouted. Multiple weapons locks! Evasive maneuvers, Alex ordered, moving to the co-pilot's position. Maximum thrust toward the Vancouver's position. On the communication screen, Washington's expression turned grave. It appears the Zaxari are taking no chances. Commander Reed, get your people to safety. We'll proceed with the operation as planned. The screen went dark as weapons fire began to streak past the shuttle's viewports. They're not trying to destroy us, Alex realized as he studied the tactical display. Those shots are deliberately wide. They're trying to herd us away from the moon. Away from our rendezvous point, Quan said grimly. Alex made a quick decision. New course, he told the pilot. Take us directly toward the nearest defense platform. Sir? The pilot questioned, clearly shocked. You heard me, Alex confirmed. They're expecting us to run away from their weapons. Let's do the opposite. The pilot hesitated only briefly before adjusting course. The shuttle surged forward, now flying directly toward the source of the weapons fire. Ambassador, Alex said, turning to Quan, I suggest you and the rest of the diplomatic staff secure yourselves for potential impact. Quan gave him a look that suggested she thought he might be insane, but nodded and moved to comply. As the shuttle accelerated toward the Zaxari defense platform, the enemy fire became increasingly erratic. Just as Alex had predicted, they weren't prepared for a target that moved toward danger, rather than away from it. They're adjusting their firing solutions, the pilot reported tensely. We have maybe 30 seconds before they zero in on us. Maintain course, Alex ordered. On my mark, execute a maximum G dive beneath the platform's primary firing arc, then full burn toward the moon's shadow. The seconds ticked by agonizingly as they hurtled toward what looked like certain destruction. The Zaxari weapons fire grew more accurate with each salvo, energy beams sizzling past them with decreasing margins. Now, Alex shouted when they reached the optimum position. The pilot slammed the control yoke forward, sending the shuttle into a steep dive that pressed Alex back into his seat with crushing force. For several heart-stopping seconds, it seemed like they might not make it. Then they were past the platform's firing arc, streaking toward the dark side of the moon with all engines at maximum. We've lost them temporarily, the pilot reported, her voice strained but professional. Their tracking systems can't penetrate the moon's mineral composition. The Vancouver? Alex asked. Still at the rendezvous coordinates, she confirmed. We'll reach them in 3 minutes if we maintain this trajectory. Alex allowed himself a moment of relief before activating the internal comm. Ambassador Quan, status report? All personnel accounted for, came Quan's slightly shaken voice. Though I believe several of us will be filing formal complaints about your piloting decisions once we're safely home. Alex grinned despite the tension. Noted, Ambassador. We should reach the Vancouver in approximately 3 minutes, assuming the Zaxari don't. Warning klaxons cut him off as new alerts flashed across the tactical display. Multiple targets emerging from behind the moon's northern hemisphere, the pilot reported, her voice tight.
Zaxari interceptors moving to cut us off from the rendezvous point. How many? 6. No, 8 craft, fast attack profile.
Alex studied the display grimly. There was no way their unarmed diplomatic shuttle could evade 8 military interceptors.
Vancouver, this is Reed, he said into the comm.
We have 8 bogies moving to intercept. We need immediate support.
The response was immediate. Vancouver copies, deploying countermeasures now.
From behind the moon's southern pole, bright flares of energy suddenly erupted, decoys designed to confuse Zaxari targeting systems. At the same time, the sleek form of the Vancouver itself emerged from hiding, its point defense systems already tracking the interceptors.
Make for the primary hangar bay, came the ship's captain's voice.
We'll keep them busy. As the shuttle adjusted course toward the waiting Earth vessel, Alex watched the tactical display with a mixture of tension and hope. The Vancouver was a formidable ship, but it was still outmatched 8-1. Then something unexpected happened. The Zaxari interceptors, instead of pressing their attack, suddenly broke formation and scattered, as if fleeing from some unseen threat.
What the hell? Alex muttered, then keyed the comm. Captain, are you seeing this?
Affirmative, Commander, came the reply, sounding equally puzzled.
They're bugging out, all of them.
Any idea why? There was a pause, then. We're getting massive energy readings throughout the Zaxari system. Some kind of spatial anomalies appearing everywhere. It's like space itself is rippling. Alex's eyes widened in realization. Operation Smoke and Mirrors. They've activated it. As the shuttle glided into the Vancouver's hangar bay, the main view screen showed the scene behind them. Across the entire visible hemisphere of Zaxar Prime, shimmering distortions were appearing in the sky, tears in reality that glowed with unearthly light, opening and closing seemingly at random. It's beautiful, the pilot whispered, and terrifying. That's humanity in a nutshell, Alex replied, echoing the words he'd spoken to Trazcor not so long ago. Beautiful and terrifying. As the hangar doors closed behind them, and the Vancouver prepared to jump to FTL, Alex couldn't help but wonder what was going through the Zaxari's minds right now. Were they panicking? Preparing for what they thought was an imminent invasion through dimensional portals? Or were the smarter ones among them already figuring out that it was all an elaborate illusion? Either way, he suspected that Admiral Washington would be receiving a request for renewed peace talks very soon. Supreme War Leader Zonvax stared at the holographic display in horror as reports flooded in from across the Zaxari system. The spatial anomalies, what humans would call portals, were appearing everywhere, in orbit around Zaxar Prime, near critical military installations, even inside the secure perimeter of the Imperial Palace itself. "Status of the Jupiter operation?" he demanded, fighting to keep his voice steady. Fleet Commander Krelvor's hologram flickered as he replied. "Target destroyed, Supreme Leader. The human research facility has been completely eliminated. And yet their weapons are already deployed," Zonvax said bitterly. "We were too late." Science Director Zalnara spoke up, her appendages trembling visibly. "The anomalies appear to be stable but inactive, Supreme Leader. They're opening and closing, but nothing is emerging from them." "Yet," Zonvax said grimly, "they're showing us that they could strike anywhere at any time." "There's more," Zalnara continued reluctantly. "We're detecting quantum resonance patterns consistent with entanglement networks. The humans aren't just creating these portals, they're observing us through them. Gathering intelligence on our responses, our defenses." "Can we close them?" Krelvor demanded. "Neutralize them somehow?" "We don't even understand how they're generating them," Zalnara admitted. "The technology is beyond our current theoretical framework." Zonvax felt a cold dread settling in his primary heart. He had gambled and lost. The attack on the Jupiter facility had not prevented the deployment of the human dimensional weapons. It had triggered it. "Send a message to Earth," he ordered finally. "Priority channel, highest diplomatic protocols." "The message, Supreme Leader?" his communications officer prompted. Zonvax stared at the shimmering portal that had appeared in the corner of the war room itself, a silent reminder of human technological superiority. "Tell them," he began, then steeled himself. "Tell them that the Zaxari Dominion acknowledges the recent incident at Jupiter was unauthorized and does not reflect the official policy of our government. Express our profound regret for this violation of the peace treaty and request immediate discussions to strengthen our diplomatic relationship." As his officers hurried to comply, Zonvax continued to stare at the portal. Through it, He could see what appeared to be an Earth military facility. Officers moving about, screens displaying Zaxari strategic positions, a human admiral watching him with a knowing smile.
It was a message, clear as day. We can see you. We can reach you. Anywhere. Anytime. The war, it seemed, had indeed ended. Not with the bang of stellar weapons, but with the quiet terror of knowing that the walls of reality itself were no barrier to human ingenuity.
1 month later, Alex found himself back in Admiral Washington's office at Luna Command, this time under considerably less stressful circumstances.
The new treaty has been ratified by both governments, Washington informed him, looking pleased. The Zaxari have agreed to expanded demilitarized zones around all human colonies, comprehensive technology exchange protocols, and joint scientific research initiatives. All because they think we can pop dimensional portals into their bedrooms while they're sleeping, Alex said with a shake of his head. It's almost not fair. Fair doesn't enter into it when the survival of our species is at stake, Commander, Washington replied, though without rancor. Besides, the quantum entanglement network is real enough, even if the portals were mostly elaborate holograms combined with minor gravitational distortions. And Dr. Reyes's gravity weapon? Proceeding well, now that we have breathing room to develop it properly, Washington said. Though with any luck, we'll never need to use it. She pushed a data tablet across her desk toward him. Which brings me to your next assignment. Alex picked it up and scanned the contents, his eyebrows rising. You're sending me back to Zaxar Prime as a permanent military attaché? Someone needs to maintain the illusion that our dimensional technology is real and operational, Washington explained. Someone who's already established a rapport with key Zaxari officials, and who has demonstrated a talent for creative intimidation. You want me to keep bluffing them, Alex translated. Washington smiled. I prefer to think of it as active deterrence through psychological operations. But yes, essentially. And if they figure out it was all smoke and mirrors? Then you'd better hope Dr. Reyes has that gravity weapon ready, Washington replied, though her tone suggested she wasn't particularly worried. But I don't think it will come to that. The Zaxari respect strength, and more importantly, they respect unpredictability, which humanity has in abundance. Alex considered this. You know, Sub-Emissary Trazcor once told me that our most dangerous weapon wasn't our technology, but our calculated unpredictability. At the time, I thought he was just trying to get under my skin, but maybe he had a point. A profound one, Washington agreed. Throughout human history, our greatest advantage has never been our weapons, but our creativity in using them, and in making our adversaries believe they're even more formidable than they actually are. She stood and walked to the lunar viewport, gazing out at the Earth hanging in the blackness. The Zaxari military doctrine is built on certainty, on knowing exactly what they're facing and preparing precise countermeasures. But how do you prepare for an enemy who might weaponize stars today, dimensional boundaries tomorrow, and who knows what the day after that? You don't, Alex said simply. You make peace with them instead. Exactly. Washington turned back to him. So, Commander Reed, are you ready to go back to Zaxar Prime and be humanity's unpredictable best face? Alex thought about it for all of 2 seconds before nodding. When do I leave? Your transport departs in 6 hours, Washington said. Oh, and you'll be taking a new science attaché with you. Let me guess, Alex said with a smile. Dr. Reyes? Washington nodded. She specifically requested the assignment. Something about field testing theoretical applications of quantum resonance patterns in diplomatic settings. She wants to mess with the Zaxari, Alex translated. In the interests of lasting peace, of course, Washington agreed, her eyes twinkling. As Alex left the office to prepare for his new assignment, he couldn't help but think about what awaited him on Zaxar Prime. More conversations with Trazcor, more carefully calculated leaks about non-existent superweapons, more bluffing and counter-bluffing in this strange new form of interstellar diplomacy. The war had ended, but the game, the very human game of making your opponents believe you held better cards than you actually did, was just beginning. And strangely enough, he was looking forward to it. After all, what could be more human than winning not through overwhelming force, but through sheer audacity and the creative application of bullshit? That, Alex reflected with a smile, was humanity in a nutshell. Humanity, fuck yeah. The end.